All right, so I'd like to welcome you to our briefing today. This is where we have those who are traveling from Germany, experts in renewable energy, are urging the Canadian government to get serious about renewable energy. And this is important in terms of not only the energy, but also addressing environmental issues and in the context of unstable oil prices. I'd like to also welcome a representative of the German embassy who will welcome the guests here. So Martin Schürlich will provide that welcome now.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. As you know, the Energiewende in Germany, as we call it, is one of the most ambitious political projects of our times. Not all answers are in place yet. There are lots of discussion at the moment in Germany of how, when, and what to do to accomplish the Energiewende in total. So the German embassy is happy to support an exchange of expert views on this topic. We're happy to bring to Canada two renowned experts in the field of energy, Mrs. Verlin and Mr. Fleck from Germany, who toured Canada for a while and are here to bring their views to the Canadian Parliament as well. So I'll leave the floor to Mr. Fleck first for a short introduction and his views on the Energiewende. Thank you very much.
Morning, my name is Bertram Fleck. I'm head of a district named Rhein-Hunsrück area in Germany, 102,000 inhabitants, 1,000 square kilometers, and 137 settlements. We began our activities 15 years ago because of the finite nature of fossil fuel, carbon dioxide discussion, dependence on Arabic countries and Russia, and especially because of the explosive development of the cost. For example, Germany has $130 billion to pay for import costs for energy, 40% more than 2010. For my region, it means $410 million per year. And we ask us, why should you lend this money to Russia or to Arabic countries? We want to convert this into regional job and regional added value. How did we do this? We have some activities. First, optimization of building and redevelopment measures. Second, we have a lot of farmers, 15 biogas plants. My district created 3 biomass heating networks in school centers with tree and shrub cuttings collected by private people on 120 collecting points. We cut this, we take the wood chips and heat 3 school centers. $8 million invest, saving 700,000 liters of oil. That means in 20 years, 30 millions of dollars keeping in the region, not going outside. We have 3,600 solar panels on the roof. It's a special program. Everybody can look in the internet if his roof is suitable. We have more than 200 wind turbines on the area of communities. Not so easy because sometimes the people are critical about change the landscape. But a great advantage for the communities because they get lease for 20 years for the area. 2 results. First result, in total, we produce 177 of our total energy about of renewable energy. So we are an energy exporter, 77% more than we use. Next year, we will have 262. Second, the regional added value. We had a great invest in the last 15 years. That means, first, the summary of all invest coming from outside, from private people, in 15 years is $1.3 billion. And the regional amount, only 10%, 110 million. Coming from outside for our craftsmen, for bank, for others. And the second point, the regional added value per annual, that's $50 million. $50 million are going in my region, not to one company like in earlier times, to 3,600 inhabitants who are entrepreneurs by solar panels, to the communities who get the lease, to all other people. So it's a great success. We are lucky to do this. We had first discussion, and very fast we decided to go step by step. So it's a success. We are glad about it. Thank you.
Oh, hello. Let me complement these remarks with some perspectives from the German federal level. Overall, in Germany in 2000, our renewable electricity production covered 4% of our electricity consumption. And through the renewables boom that we had through the last 15 years, we are now in 2013 at 24% of electricity that is covered by renewable electricity. This is a development that was unimaginable and conceived impossible initially, but we're very happy that it came that way. Because this allows us to do something that Canada, that Alberta at least, where we were until now, also tries to do, which is phase out one of the generation sources that we don't like. Germany was reliant to 30% on nuclear power until the year of 2000. It has decided to phase out nuclear power, and we're well on the way. Today, nuclear power covers only 15%, so that's half the share of what it used to share, and we can demonstrate that renewables were making up that change. So this helps us achieve ambitious goals. It helps us generate local revenue, as my colleague Mr. Fleck pointed out very well. And it shows that it's possible to think about the power sector in different terms. We also experience that the terminology in our power sector changes. For example, we will have to do away with the concept of baseload, which I understand is still very prevalent in Canada, and a number of other fundamental changes are also about to come. We are lucky because we are doing this at a point in time when our power sector is needing considerable reinvestment anyway. But we also look forward to doing this in the best way, cost effectively, and with a look towards serving the people and the health and of people and the environment. And I think there is no better ambassador than my colleague, Mr. Fleck, who has been very well able to convince many of the people that we were speaking to here about the benefits, the local benefits that you can derive from a local distributed self-generated electricity. Thanks for your attention.
So you've heard 2 points of view. One, which is really looking at the remarkable changes that are happening on a grassroots level in rural areas and municipalities right across Germany, where governments and the people generally, along with certainly industry, are collaborating together and moving forward. Right now, at this moment, there are over 9 million people who are living in areas that are already 100% renewable electricity. There's a total of over 21 million Germans who live in areas that either have that already or are well on track to accomplishing that. And if you think about the population of Canada, that we're talking about close to certainly 60% of Canadians in that kind of regime would be in regions that are already have renewable energy. So this is a remarkable story. This created over hundreds of thousands of jobs. The share of the energy grid going from carbon-based to renewably based fuels and energy sources has increased to 24 or 25%. And we also have great investment from the people of Germany, where polling fairly consistently is showing that people value this change that's taking place. It's something they want to leave for their children, for their families, and they also really appreciate the fact that that's also revitalizing the local communities and creating jobs and creating value within those communities. What would happen if we could do this in Canada? Which of our political parties here could provide the leadership about moving forward with this? Because what we would need is a party that is committed to certainly allowing that development to take place on the ground in municipalities, but would also create a larger vision federally for Canada that would create the targets and the goals, while at the same time removing the barriers that presently exist for it to happen. There is no scientific or technological barrier that exists now. These changes are being made with existing technology. We could do exactly the same thing and participate in the clean tech renewable energy revolution and the massive market that has evolved globally on that level. So what in our tour to Calgary and Edmonton and now here in Ottawa, what we're bringing is a message as a good news story. It can be done. It is something that can be supported by the people, and certainly we think it is time for the Government of Canada and for all the political parties to find ways of partnering or collaborating to see if we can move forward in the same kind of way that our friends in Germany have. Thank you very much for your attention, and we're happy to take your questions. And we have, there's any MPs here? Okay. Okay, so you can start questions now. Okay.
Wonderful, yeah. Herr Fleck.
Yeah.
Ich habe eine Frage.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you. Let's talk about the unreliability of a lot of this solar power, wind power, and the fact that there are talks and even reports that Germany's opened up new gas and coal-fired plants to support and back up some of the unreliability with the renewable energy. Can you talk to that?
Ja, ungefähr. Es geht die Frage. Yeah. I think it is possible to have 100%, but we need a basic loaded time. So we need more gas plants in the future because gas plants are very easy run in a highway or to draw it down because the wind is not going on over the day and also the sun. So we need some gas plants.
But it's not true that we have it. Actually, our gas power plants are running too expensive to compete on the power market. So they are not dispatched as often as they should be in order to maintain their economic viability. So,
how much of it is government subsidized, your renewable energy?
There are no official technical government subsidies. What the government has provided is a legal framework. That legal framework provides for a regulated private-to-private transaction at a regulated rate, which is commonly known as the feed-in tariff. This legislation also has other regulation aspects, like it's regulating the grid access, it's regulating the terms at which this power has to be sold. If you look at the total of renewable installations in Germany, more than 90% benefit from this regulation. I hope that answers your question.
So, Frau Wöhler, another question I have for you is, what would you like to see Canada do? What would you like to see Canada do?
I think the eyes of the world are on Canada in terms of contributing to climate change. Or actually to its avoidance or to its mitigation. So we would really love to have commitment of Canada for any kind of carbon dioxide emission reductions. And we know that Canada has the potential to do that and has the potential to do that at economic terms that are much more viable and much more sustainable than Germans' terms, just because you have much better resources, even also in the renewable area. You don't only have fossil resources or nuclear fuel resources, you have all kinds. So we would love you to use these resources that damage your landscape, which we also like as tourists, much less, and help preserve the global environment as well as your local environment.
One last question. A recent report came out by the Fraser Institute in Canada, and in Ontario here, it costs about 20% of our electrical bill is 20% for the renewable energy, but it's only supplying 4% of power. But yet it's costing 20%, so it's very, very expensive here.
I cannot speak to the Canadian relationship, but
in Germany, auf Deutschland, in Deutschland.
Yeah. Well, we have bills that go up, electricity bills that go up. But we also have heating bills that go up. We also have car fuel becoming more expensive. We do have, as I mentioned, we have an investment cycle in our power plants that requires new investment. So we expect electricity prices to go up further also because of that. Of course, renewable energy are a new investment and you have to buy down the capital costs first. So it's not necessarily possible to compare all the power plants at the power exchange at the same prices. this brings me to the effect that many people will tell you that they think it's expensive, but I tell you that this is a question of how you compare and contrast and combine all these energy sources. So I'm not willing to give a straight answer to that question.
May I add something? The German press people always ask this question: is too expensive, is terrible, the charge is $300 per year for everybody. But the press do not ask another question. I would ask you a question. Do you know the subsidies for fossil energy in the last 40 years? Nobody knows it. But it's you can read about it, but not in the newspaper. I give you the number, $781 billion within 40 years substitute for coal, for atomic, and so on. And that's not the cost to follow in the next 100 and 1,000 years, because nobody is speaking about the cost of nuclear Entsorgung. Waste disposal for the next 100 years, or pumping up groundwater where we have the coal mines, 50, 70 millions per year, so-called eternal burden. So if you will really compare, you must also mention these numbers.
And I think what a deeper analysis will show are several things that have already been mentioned. One is that there's not a level playing field and has not been for decades, that the nuclear industry, fossil fuel industry, coal have all received very, very extensive subsidies. So the question is, how come those are not appearing in those kinds of analysis? So if you factor that in, that's part of the equation. Second part is that there are also other costs. We know from coal that in Alberta alone, $300 million a year is calculated in terms of meeting the healthcare impacts. We have, through our analysis, the report that was generated last year, that we have number of asthma attacks, say, in each day, that there are hospital admissions, and that 100 Albertans a year die from healthcare or causes in terms of damage to their health that are in part contributed to by coal. So if you factor in the healthcare costs as well, then let's talk about water, that in terms of many of the extraction procedures are now taking great amounts of water outside of the hydrological cycle at a time in climate change when we're going to desperately need that water for normal purposes. What are the costs of that? So there are many costs that are externalized, and as soon as you factor that in, I think it becomes very clear that not only is it economically beneficial, but it is an imperative in terms of our human health and in terms of protecting our environment and also responding to the demands of climate change, that we recognize that it's not even anywhere close to an equal equation. That rather than investing in an antiquated energy structure, whether it's natural gas or nuclear or oil or coal, that nonetheless we need to make the leap, as Germany has, directly into and put our investments into a new infrastructure that's the energy system of the future.
I've lived in British Columbia, and I worked in many media outlets there, and there was no sunshine for a good 5 months. It was all overcast, cloudy. So the solar cells, the solar panels, you need to have that backup power supply. You need to have the fossil fuels. You need to have it.
That is true, but there's some very important things that are happening in Germany on that, specifically that issue, which is what is a base load, and what I think many places are now starting to find is if you combine systems. For example, in northern Germany, there's what's called a system called Kombi-Kraftwerk, which integrated multiple energy sources. I think it's about 32 or 33 source points, 4 different forms of renewable energy. So solar, wind, hydro, and biomass. No fossil fuels, no carbon-centered fuels were involved with that. And they have solved the problems of reliability and the issues that you're speaking of. The other piece is around solar, wind, hydro, and biomass, those 4 sources. So I think the research is showing that actually there's a whole shift, and when you introduce the idea of smart grids and having distributed rather than having central points, which of course are vulnerable to if there's no wind or not, but you have multiple source points, then all those kinds of issues can be addressed.
I was curious. You said, I think said you had 200 turbines, wind turbines in Germany.
In my district, only in my district. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How many in total?
Total in Germany?
Thanks.
No.
20,000 or
20,000
so.
perhaps. Yeah.
Well, my question is in Ontario, where they did start a somewhat ambitious program to put up towers, and they created a lot of public opposition, mostly because they put them in all the wrong places. And I wonder what you did in Germany to, or I presume you did that, you took steps to avoid annoying local residents.
We also had opposition, but I'm 65 old, and I asked the people, do you remember the number of power lines in your region? Nobody knows this. They didn't notice it because it was built 50, 80 years ago. You are familiar that it's normal. I asked the people, do you make your mind something, think about the roads, the highways? It's a changing of landscape. Oh no, we have our car, we use it every day, though it's normal. You perhaps remember 150 years ago, there was a construction of railway. What a great changing of landscape. But in my age, I use the railway. I know that the railway station in Frankfurt has 72 hectares area, full of steel and stones. And if you're going in the railway station, 10 minutes before the train is going langsamer, slowly and slowlier. In earlier times, there were perhaps little farmers with little trees and apples and so on. Perhaps they were very angry that is somebody coming and said, oh, I have a new technique. It's called railway. Please leave your acres away. Now we have to install steel and stones. They worry about it. I think so. But for us, it's normal. So the opposition is starting in my age, 65 and so on. The young people, they are growing up with this new technology. And we have a choice. In 40 years, perhaps, you can throw down the wind turbines. Perhaps you have another possibility. Yeah? But nuclear plants, they will stay for the next some thousand years.
Maybe can I go back to the price tag question?
Yes, go to
So I understand that the member of parliament, our economic committee, is also on the way, and they will tell you that what they consider the price tag on these renewable energies are 24 billion euros. Of these 24 billion euros, only 19 billion go to renewable facilities and the rest is transaction costs. These 19 billion euros could be reduced drastically if the parliament would put in place an ordinance of marketing this energy smarter. So that's why I'm not willing to give you a straight answer to the question, is this expensive or not? Because it is distorting the market prices for electricity, increasing this price tag of 19 billion euros. Plus, this is not a relevant figure for Canada. If Canada would embark on a deployment of renewable energy at grand scale now, they would not incur the same price tag. Why? Because when we started, these technologies were very expensive and we're still paying down the 20-year power purchase agreements that were initially started with that scheme. And most of these 24 billion or 19 billion euros are actually inherited costs that we cannot go away with, because these are private-to-private transactions and these contracts need to be paid heed to. So starting the scheme over, a new price tag that would develop over time will still be much cheaper than what we are paying down. So this is of no relevance for your situation.
So we also have 3 guests here. So each MP, and I want to welcome all of them here: Elizabeth May from the Green Party, Linda Duncan from the New Democratic Party, John MacKay from the Liberal Party. Each of them will make a very brief 1-minute statement, but also be available for your questions. So I'm going to invite Linda Duncan first.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to share with you that in the last 3 weeks, I've met with 3 delegations from Germany. And the message from all 3 is very important to the province I come from, Alberta, because Germany has the same deregulated private spot market system for delivery of electricity and power to their citizens. And we can learn a lot from them in this country and in my province. What they're showing us is, if you have the political will anything is possible. What we're missing in this country is the political will. Do not listen to this nonsense of talking about the percentage of fossil fuel or renewable power in this country. In Canada, electricity is delivered on a provincial basis. It doesn't cross east to west, even though that probably would make sense, delivering hydro. It just generally does not happen. So you have to look at each separate system. In my province, the vast majority is still coal-fired power. It is not true that gas is replacing coal-fired. As we speak, I am one of the interveners against a gas plant proposed in my area. The biggest industrial complex in Alberta is coal-fired power, and there is going to be gas plus coal, which, as my colleague has stated from the University of Calgary, we already have medical specialists coming forward and saying we're already having serious health problems from coal-fired power adjacent to Edmonton. So I commend our colleagues. I particularly commend Mr. Fleck, who has taken on this challenge during his tenure of power in regional government. He deserves considerable congratulations, and both of these experts for coming to Canada to share their story, that once you have the political will, all is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth May for the Green Party. It's an honor to join colleagues from Germany and the University of Calgary here and my parliamentary colleagues. There is a lot of nonsense out there about how renewable energy can't cut it. The example from Germany is inspiring, it's practical, it's real. And forgive me for a moment of partisanship, I'm proud to say that I know that this push for major renewable drive in Germany was due to the German Green Party and coalition at the time. It's created jobs in Germany. It's worked to make Germany more competitive. It's created new clean tech sectors. Similar stories come out of Denmark, come from around the world. And right now, Canada is an outlier. We're the only country, I think, in the world, but certainly in the industrialized world, that has refused to join the International Renewable Energy Agency. We are sitting this one out, folks, and it's going to be bad for the economy as well as bad for our climate footprint. So we can learn a lot from the inspiring example of what's been done in Germany with renewable energy. And again, Dankeschön. Thank you so much to the German delegates for being here.
My name is John MacKay. I'm the Member of Parliament for Scarborough-Guildwood and the Liberal Party's Environment Critic. And I want to thank Bertram and Christine and Mishka for making the effort to come here and inform us about what is going on in Germany. I was privileged to host a breakfast this morning, and I thought that they did a brilliant job at destroying the false food fight between the economy and the environment. Not only has Germany, not only has your community, but your country as a whole, not only have they succeeded brilliantly at clean energy, but they have a manufacturing economy which is our envy. And so it shows quite dramatically that these are not mutually exclusive ideas. And I think that for too long, we've said, well, we'll sacrifice the environment for the economy. That is a false dichotomy. And I would rather hope that with your presence and others, that we will break that false dichotomy and come to recognize in all of our policies and all of our applications that what is good for the environment is also good for the economy. And the other thing that I really took away was that they have been brilliant at bringing the concerns of the environmentalists, which is great hunks of ice breaking off someplace in the Arctic or Antarctic, down to how does that affect your pocketbook? Why are you paying increased insurance monies, premiums on your insurance? Why is it that we're having to pay for municipal infrastructure which is more robust, and how this all flows through to people's pocketbook? And I think once you connect that great hunk of ice falling off in the Arctic with a person's pocketbook, you change the political dialogue, and then possibly we can start to move forward and do a little catch-up to Germany. So again, thank you very much.
Hear a little bit about the reaction from Canadians to whom you talked about the German experience, and from Mr. Lissack, you talked about the barriers that we have here in Canada. Could you tell a little bit more about this? What are the barriers that we face here in Canada?
I was here in 2011 already and did a similar speaking tour, and also in 2009. And I must say, what struck me as different was that there is a much higher attention and awareness and interest from the political level than it was at that time. My previous two tours were very much born by a community interest in, for example, Nova Scotia, but also other eastern provinces and also in Alberta. People were interested on what they could do on their local level to implement that. And they were looking to the government for leadership a lot. And at least in Alberta, we have found that the government and all the opposition parties are now also starting to think about what can be done there. So that's very encouraging. I'm actually very happy to see that.
I think the barriers that we would want to eliminate on a federal level that would facilitate an emergence, I think, of a dynamic renewable energy and clean tech revolution in Canada, and for us to participate in this world market in that way, would involve many of the same kinds of things that Germany has already addressed. So they've removed some of the financial barriers. They have economic and financial mechanisms. They call the feed-in tariff. It's a very simple, relatively speaking, simple piece of legislation that creates certainty, that creates a guarantee of access to the grid, and also provides, lowers the risk while also guaranteeing a repayment in terms of any capital expenditures. In other words, it's to remove all the financial barriers for whether it's a business, a community, a co-op, or individual homeowners to be able to move forward. I think those are some of the innovations that need to happen on a federal level in terms of looking at our regime of financial barriers and how could those be not only removed, but could the conditions be created for that to move forward. What about education and training? Now, true, education is a provincial jurisdiction. But I think on a federal level, in terms of strategically investing in innovation and research, and supporting, not only supporting institutions that are beginning to look at energy storage, to look at how we can develop smart grids, to take our aging infrastructure around electricity and not only bring it into this century, but also to anticipate how can we create one where ordinary people and communities, municipalities can feed into the grid. That's something that the federal government could really be a significant catalyst in creating that to develop. And so I think that there are some other examples too around putting a price on carbon or a levy on carbon, recognizing that when we use any kind of carbon-centered energy sources, it has an impact. And so why don't we apply the polluter pays principle, ask those companies to contribute, and there is such a system. It's a modest system. It only involves a small group of high-level investors, and it's not high enough of a fee, $15 a ton, but there is the beginnings of a system in Alberta. Could there not be some discussion among the political parties as to what kind of way of pricing carbon and of leveling the playing field so that our business people here in Canada, as well as our engineers and scientists and so on, can really get to work and develop, I think, a truly world-class energy system that depends on the sun and on water and renewable energy sources rather than on ones that are creating environmental and health problems for us.
Could I just add there, and a good overview, one clear area of responsibility for the federal government are our First Nation communities. And the First Nation communities are way ahead of the federal government. What is exciting to discover is how many of the communities are already installing solar, training their members to install solar, and then moving on and training non-Aboriginal communities of how they can save money using solar and using wind. And so that's one area clearly for our isolated Aboriginal communities and for the North. So there is lots of avenue. The other one that you didn't mention is more quickly removing the perverse incentives, which Canada has committed to, and we are dragging our heels. There's lots of ways to impose a price on carbon, but I think as our German colleagues have shown us, the biggest trigger to get people to move is to show that we can save money by energy retrofitting and shifting to clean sources. I'm proud of the fact that I encouraged my Public Works Committee to do a study of how much money could be used of federal taxpayers if we were more serious at the federal level in energy retrofits of federal buildings. And there is a report and it's available online. I'd be happy to give you the connection to that. The conservative members of that committee got it, but unfortunately the government hasn't got it yet. The United States actually imposes by legal directive each of their federal departments and facilities to reduce by a set time period they have to buy a certain percentage of renewable power and reduce water use. There are lots of tools available to our federal government. They just simply have to start doing it. Yes.
I mean, you're an MP in Alberta.
Yes.
I'm from Calgary, it's my hometown.
Yes.
Alberta is oil and gas. The history of the province is oil and gas. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar empire. It's the economic engine that turns Canada. How do you go to Albertans and say, okay, it's time to shut all that down and we're going to use solar and wind power now?
What does that have to do with anything? The oil sands have nothing to do, excuse me, the oil sands have nothing to do with the supply of electricity to Albertans. It comes from coal-fired power and gas power. A lot of the coal-fired power companies have been smart. They've bought up a lot of the wind companies. So in fact, our province is also built on agriculture and small business. In moving towards renewable power and energy efficiency is not shutting down industry in Alberta. Our colleagues have pointed out, and they are trying to move in that direction in Germany, that it's time for industry to be switching over and also accessing cleaner sources of power. Certainly the oil sands could be shifting in that direction. I understand that there are some solar panels, I think, on some of the oil pumps now. It's just that there hasn't been any real incentive to do that. You're not anti-oil and gas industry simply because you suggest that we could be a cleaner country and have taxpayers saving money by shifting over to renewable power and investing in energy efficiency.
Can I just add too? It's a frequently exaggerated point, and this is not an argument in any way for shutting down the oil and gas industry, but just to keep it in perspective, the bitumen from the oil sands is about 2% of GDP for all of Canada. There's a lot that goes on in Alberta and across Canada that's not bitumen dependent, and in fact, we're taking a very large economic risk, a bad financial play, on the words of a lot of people who are watching the price of a barrel of oil, if we put all our eggs in the bitumen basket. It's not a safe basket. And we're going to be looking at demands for a transition to a more diversified energy economy. Renewables can do a lot. And right now and I know that the Harper Conservatives make the claim that we have so much of our energy infrastructure for electricity based on renewables. Large-scale hydro dams are generally not classified as renewables. And in the case of, in my province, Site C, proposed for northern BC, $9 billion project, very, very controversial, we could get as much energy by marrying wind power in northern BC near Site C with storage in reservoirs that are already there. That's a solution that the Nordics have figured out. Denmark generates so much wind power it can't use it all. And because it wants to store it, it goes to Norway, where it's used to pump water up into reservoirs to be released later. And so this synergy between different renewables, with wind creating, in some cases, more energy than can be used at the moment, and storage through hydro facilities, you actually get the capacity for that, what we call the baseload solution, where renewable energy can take the place of relying on fossil fuels or large-scale hydro. There are solutions out there, and there's no point in pretending that the good ideas somehow are a threat to existing industries. Linda Duncan just nailed it. Thank you, Linda.
May I add one last sentence? Excuse me. It always seems impossible until it's done. It's from Nelson Mandela. Thank you.